En sus papeles, ustedes van a indicar, primero, van a aplicar la frase, yo le vendí, y el nombre de su prenda de ropa. Por ejemplo, yo le vendí los blue jeans, ¿no? A Anastasia por y el precio negociado, ¿no? Por 500 pesos o algo así. ¿Ok? Entonces, empecemos con las sandalias. Las sandalias. Empecemos con las sandalias. No, tú compraste las sandalias, pero tú vendiste. Ok, so gracias. Entonces, en sus papeles, chicos, vamos a escribir Juliana. En sus papeles, empiecen con Juliana. Ok, Juliana. Sí. So, Juliana, yo le vendí. Tú dices.
Yo le vendí
Las
sandalias a ella por
¿Cuántos?
500
500 pesos. Perfecto. Muy bien. Excelente. Ok, ahora, los blue jeans. ¿Quién vendió los blue jeans? Emilia. Ok. Entonces, escribimos Emilia en los papeles. Emilia.
le vendió los blue jeans a Anastasia por
2,000. Muchos pesos. ¿No? 2,000 pesos. ¿Ok? Muy bien. Gracias. Ahora, la camisa. ¿Quién vendió la camisa? Oh, ¿ella? Oh, sí, ok. So, yo le vendí.
Yo le vendí la camisa a Marina por 3,000.
3,000 pesos. Marina, ¿sí?
Yeah.
¿Compraste la camisa? Pablo tiene la camisa. Entonces, ¿tú vendiste la camisa a Pablo después? Oh, ok. Marina, una mujer de negocios. Muy bien, excelente, ok. Ahora vamos con el suéter. ¿Quién vendió el suéter? Ok, Juanita.
Yo le vendí
Muy bien.
un suéter a Margarita por
¿Cuántos pesos? Más o menos, aproximadamente. 1,000 pesos. Muy bien. Excelente. Gracias, Juanita. ¿Y quién vendió el cinturón? Javier.
Yo le vendí el cinturón a Juliana por 1,000 pesos.
Muy bien. Javier le vendió el cinturón a Juliana. ¿Por cuántos pesos?
1,000.
1,000 pesos. También. Excelente. Los zapatos de tenis. Ok, Anastasia.
Yo le vendí los zapatos de tenis a Catalina por 300 pesos.
Muy bien. Oh, muy baratos. 300 pesos. Muy bien, Catalina. Excelente. Fantástico. All right. Los pantalones cortos. ¿Quién vendió los pantalones cortos? Marina.
Yo le vendí los pantalones cortos a Juanita por 2,000.
2,000 pesos. Más o menos. Marina le vendió los pantalones cortos a Juliana por 2,000 pesos extra. Y la camisa, perdón, un error. Vamos con camiseta. Porque son diferentes, ¿no? Tenemos la camisa, pero la camiseta es diferente. ¿Quién vendió la camiseta? Ok, Catalina.
Le vendió la camiseta a Octavio por
¿Cuántos pesos?
500.
500 pesos. Fantástico. Ok, muy bien, chicos. Ahora vamos a hablar de estos ejemplos, el concepto. Primero, en clase la semana pasada aprendimos el pretérito, ¿no? Vendió, o yo vendí, ¿no? Para indicar una acción del pasado, ¿no? Pero hoy estamos hablando de los pronombres de complemento indirecto, ¿no? En la lección 5 hablamos de los pronombres de complemento directo, Lola, los, las, me, te y nos. Pero ahora vamos a hablar de los pronombres de complemento indirecto. Based on this activity, based on what we just did, what is our indirect object pronoun listed here that we see over and over and over again? Lay, exactly. So, the purposes of this activity is not only apply our vocab, apply the preterite tense, but also introduce our indirect object pronoun and identify exactly what the indirect object is, or is in Spanish and in English. Lay, as Pablo said, is our indirect object pronoun, meaning what? What does lay mean in English? When I say, or Catalina said, yo le vendí la camiseta a Octavio, when she said that, what was she saying? I what?
I'm buying that for him, Octavio.
Close. Not necessarily buy, but sold. I sold. Or actually, she didn't even use the pronoun for the noun. She just used the noun. She said, I sold what? I sold the t-shirt, right? I sold the t-shirt to Octavio, is what she was saying. However, in Spanish, our pronoun le, even though we have Octavio, is referring to Octavio. We use the pronoun, which we know in English takes the place of a noun. In Spanish, because our pronoun comes before our verb, and we don't know who bought it from her or who she sold it to, we use that indirect object pronoun to cue the reader or the listener that she sold something to someone. So today that's what we're going to talk about, these indirect object pronouns, okay? And just to clarify, an indirect object, we talked about direct objects, and all of these examples, do we have any direct objects? First of all, do we have subjects? Do we have any subjects? Yes, we have subjects in all of these examples. For example, what's the subject in this first example? With las sandalias. Who's the subject? Juliana, and then Amelia, and then Bella, Juanita, Javier. Even though these people are the subjects in some of these examples, they also ended up, in different examples, we had different, what? What are these people now in these examples? Like in this example, Catalina is the subject, but Octavio is what? The indirect object or the direct object? He's actually the indirect object. So I want to clarify what, before we even talk about what indirect object pronouns are, what are indirect objects? Because in order to have an indirect object, we have to have a direct object. And what's our direct object? Just to clarify, in this last example with Catalina. The shirt, the t-shirt, is our direct object. So this is what we were talking about in chapter 5. Camiseta, pantalones, zapatos, cinturón. All of these clothing items are our direct objects. How can we tell that? How do we know that the sandalias or la camiseta is the direct object? Octavio?
Because it's what we're doing the verb to.
Right, exactly.
They come out right.
The recipient of the action, I guess, is the technical term, but you'll never hear me explain it like that because it's confusing. But our direct objects, based on what we learned in chapter 5 and what Octavio is saying, our direct objects come where in relationship to our verb vendial? Our direct objects come where? After the verb. Remember when we were looking at direct objects in chapter 5? And after we found the verb and the subject, we could find that direct object right after the verb. Okay? Like Juanita's drinking water. Water's the direct object, not to single you out. But in that example, Juanita's drinking water, or Juanita toma agua, in that particular example, agua or water comes right after the verb, right? But in that example, Juanita toma agua, do we have an indirect object? Juanita toma agua. No, we do not have an indirect object. We don't always have to have an indirect object. Usually we have a direct object, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to have an indirect object. So comparing this example, Juanita or Margarita están tomando agua, we just have subject, verb, direct object. So what's different about this particular example, Juanita toma agua, and the examples we just went through just now? Catalina le vendió la camiseta a Octavio. Obviously, this one has an indirect object and a direct object, but why? Why does the example with Catalina have both a direct and indirect object? What's different about that example with Catalina in the t-shirt and selling it to Octavio versus Juanita or Margarita drinking water? What's different? An indirect object, when we include an indirect object, we're doing something to whatever. We're doing an action to something and for or to someone. There's multiple people involved, right? With an indirect object, you have to have a direct object and also somebody else is involved. Like, I sold him the t-shirt. The t-shirt's the direct object. He is the indirect object. Okay? So, see.
If, like, you change, like, Juanita is drinking water, like, from the bottle, would that be the indirect object?
That's a good question. So, in the example, Juanita toma agua, and she said, if you include from the bottle. From the bottle, would that be the indirect object? If we added that. De la botella, from the bottle? Because that's a good question, because we're talking about, like, identifying all the elements in a sentence. From the bottle. Is that an indirect object? It's not, because why? Because it's a good question, and it's something that we confuse in English and Spanish all the time. From the bottle, or de la botella.
If it's not bottle, would it just be the prepositional phrase?
Sí, muy bien, Catalina. Excelente. Way to pull out grammar terminology from the cobwebs of like middle school. De la botella is just a prepositional phrase, right? Indirect objects, as we can see from these examples, are typically what or who? Octavio, Juanita, Catalina, Juliana, Margarita. Indirect objects are usually people. So indirect objects are like when we give something to someone. When we sell something, direct object, to someone, indirect object. Or, we buy something for someone. Usually they involve other people, the indirect objects, okay? So as you can see, this gets complicated in English and in Spanish. And we've already noticed something that's different in these phrases that we wrote out on our paper when we went through the clothing. We have both the pronoun and the noun in the same sentence in Spanish. So in order to further identify what in the world is going on in Spanish, we're going to revisit those steps that we talked about when we talked about direct objects. And we're going to first find the verb, subject, and then objects, okay? So we're building on what we know. So remember the first thing, are you all familiar with los zapatos de Tom? Tom le da zapatos a un niño. Les da zapatos a los niños in Argentina. That's part of Tom's shoes. Do you all have Tom's shoes or worn Tom's shoes or familiar with what I'm talking about? Okay. Because you're familiar, you can build on that knowledge to further understand what's going on. So if you recall with the direct objects, we first find the verb. Step one is find the verb. Why do we start with the verb? What does the verb tell us? Verbs in Spanish are A, at the 102 level, very easy to recognize, right? They're pretty easy to recognize. And also the verb tells us what? What's the second step, if you recall from our direct object? The subjects. Muy bien, Margarita. This is important because if you didn't have the picture, you didn't know about Tom's shoes, you would see a niño and Tom with da. And the verb da is third person singular. So the niño or Tom could be the subject. In this case, Tom is the subject, and we'll find out why here in a second, because there's a little clue that's really, really helpful. So first you find the verb, then you find the subject. And last chapter, after we found the subject, what do we find? This is what we focused on in chapter 5. Verb, subject, and then what? Object, right, direct object. So last chapter we were just thinking about Tom giving shoes. We didn't indicate to whom, right? We didn't have indirect objects. And our direct object comes where? In relationship to the verb? After it. So direct objects are easy to find in Spanish. They're very consistent because they're the same as English. Zapatos. So we've eliminated Tom, da, and zapatos. Now all that we're left with is le and al niño. To find the end object, this is something that's very small, but muy importante, the personal a. And here it's in a contraction with the article L. Al is just a plus L. So you might see it like this, al niño or a la niña. But that personal a mi familia, a ti, a nosotros, a Emilia y a mí. When you see that this tells you that the niño is not the subject. The niño is actually what? The indirect object. Exactly, the indirect object. And the reason why this is so important, although it seems pretty obvious to you right now, you're going to be like, I know that he gives shoes to kids. I could figure this out if I really thought about it. I don't need to go through all these steps. But on the super site, it's not going to be about Tom's shoes. And you're not going to have a picture. And you're going to have to rewrite the sentence using the most appropriate indirect object pronoun. Okay? Or identifying the indirect object. And when you look at the verb, da, and you see Tom and the niño, you might be confused as to who the subject is and who the object is because our verb is singular and third person. So what clarifies that? This personal a. When you see that a before a person and a subject, that tells you I'm the indirect object. And we talked about this last chapter because people can be direct objects. And then after you figure out your indirect object, then you can figure out which pronoun to use. And our pronoun is what? What's our pronoun in this sentence? Le. And our pronoun is le, which is a new pronoun. We've seen it a little bit. And our pronoun is referring to who? El Nino. So what can we conclude about that pronoun? So ley is our pronoun, it's our new pronoun. And ley, what do we know about ley in El Nino? Ley, we can conclude that ley is the pronoun we use when referring to whom? Anastasia, Catalina, Beja. All of these examples have le, because who are we referring to? When we say Juliana le vendió las sandalias a Beja, we're saying Juliana sold the sandals to Beja, or her. Third person singular, le. So when we look at our pronouns, which we're going to fill in now, when we look at our pronouns, and if you look at your second handout, when you look at the pronouns, we have some of the same pronouns that we use for our direct object pronouns. What pronouns are we already familiar with based on last chapter? Or actually, we've seen these previously in Spanish 101. What pronouns did we see last chapter? What pronouns are not new? What pronouns are not new? May, may, nos, and te, actually. We had te last chapter. May, nos, and te. Those are from last chapter because you can call me, I can call you, or you can call us. Okay? On your test from chapter 5, your first answer, which a lot of people typically get wrong, is Profeseta loves us. So these are pronouns that can be direct or indirect, okay? Or she gave the test back to us. And in that example, us is the indirect object pronoun because the tests are now the direct object. I'm giving something to someone. But lo, los, and las cannot be indirect object pronouns. Le and lace. And they can be second person indirect object pronouns or third person. Singular, le, plural, lace. So for chapter 6 test, you still have to know me, te, and nos, but instead of gender, lo versus la, los versus las, it's just singular or plural. Le, if we're selling something to Javier. Les, if we sold something to Javier and Amelia. Singular versus plural. Nada más. You don't have to worry about gender. Okay? ¿Entienden? ¿Está claro el concepto? So the only thing new really in chapter 6 is lay and lace. And we only use lay and lace when we're doing selling something or giving something to someone. Which is why that little a is muy importante. And notice with me, it's a me. In nos, it's a nosotros. Or a Juan y a mí. It's not even Juan y yo. If it's Juan y yo, if you see yo, yo tells you, am I the object or am I the subject? If you see yo, yo is what you use when I am the object or subject. Yo. Subject. Me, with an accent on the I after the a, tells you I'm the object. You either called me or you sold something to me or you gave me something. So it's pronounced me in English and me in Spanish, spelt differently. And notice that little accent on the I. Unlike mi casa or mi agua or mi libro, and just I, my, am I with an accent is me. To me, a me, or a ti or a usted. So notice it's not a tu, it's a ti. No accent mark. A ustedes, a ellos, a ellas. ¿Entienden? So that little a, look for it on the supersite. When you see that a in the sentence, you don't have to look for anything else. you really don't have to go through even all those steps if you're filling in the blank. If you're rewriting on the superset, you're gonna have to go through these steps. But if you're just filling in the blank on the superset, look for the and decide singular, plural, first, second, third person. Metenos, lay or lace. That's all you gotta do, okay? All right, so you know I have la pelota, and I even have this in your book, or on your paper, just so it's, clearer. And all of these examples, who's the subject? Profecita, right? Profecita. What's our verb? Da. Da is our verb, okay? And our direct object is what? La pelota. But then I do this. And now I've included Anastasia. So when I say profecita, and I've got Anastasia, which pronoun would I use for Anastasia? Lay, exactly, because why? How many people did I give it to? One person. But if I'm talking directly to Anastasia, she wouldn't use lay, she would use may. Exactly. Because she's saying profecita gives the ball to me. It's just pronounced me in Spanish. If I give the ball to all of y'all, if I give it to all of you, and you're reporting about it, you would say nos. She gives the ball to us. Exactly. Or, other students, les. Okay? Or I give it to you. ¿Entienden? So that indirect object pronoun is flexible depending on who's getting it. Okay? All right, chicos.